Hello and welcome to episode 51 of the Nourish and Strengthen podcast. I am super excited for this episode because I have my good friend Bobby Hanaghan here to talk to us about something that is so important. How are you, Bobby?
I'm stunning. How are you doing?
You guys are going to love listening to his voice too throughout the next half hour or so. It's so great. I mean, who doesn't love a British accent, right? You're from the UK, and I actually just asked you, like, where in the UK, hoping he'd say something easy like London, but no, you said what?
The Wirral. So when I say the Wirral, it's not like, that's not one word. It's like the, and then Wirral, and it's Wirral. It's near Liverpool. That's what I normally say.
Okay, I know Liverpool. Yeah. That's so
It's
funny.
like, Liverpool's the city, and I'm not a city guy. Like, I'm way too simple.
Okay.
That's too complicated for me.
Okay.
So the Wirral, we have the River Mersey, which is next to Liverpool, and that separates Liverpool from us. And we're a bit like outside my window right now. There's trees, there's a golf course just over there. It's
amazing.
It's very green and natural.
Yeah.
So I prefer the Wirral because it's a bit calmer.
It sounds like a land from like Lord of the Rings or something.
I've not heard that before, but I'll take it.
Well, actually, I've actually only seen Lord of the Rings once, and it's been so many years. But so maybe it doesn't. Maybe everybody who's listening is like, "You are crazy, Lindsay! Like you have no idea what you're talking about." Anyways, let's go ahead and jump in. So Bobby and I met in a business mentorship, and Bobby, I love your content on social media. Your Bobby Nutrition on Instagram, right? Everybody needs to go find you. Your videos are so, I don't even know the word. They're so like heartfelt, and they make me cry like almost every time I see them just because of the way you talk. And I was like, we have to have you on the podcast. So can you tell us a little bit more about, what you do, who you help, that kind of thing?
Yes, of course. So as Lindsay said, guys, my name is Rob, for Bobby Nutrition on Instagram. And
do you go by Rob and I've always called you Bobby?
No, it's both. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I think professionally, I kind of had to make a decision one day, because it was always kind of Rob, and like my friends call me Bobby as well. It was kind of like a nickname.
Okay.
And then professionally, like I can't call myself Rob Nutrition. How boring is that? So we went with Bobby Nutrition. So it kind of just went on from there.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Gotcha.
So Rob, Bobby, whatever floats your boat.
Okay.
And we focus on people who it's not just a weight loss program. Interestingly, weight loss may not even come into it with who we work with. We work with people who have gotten to a point in their life where they realize that their relationship with food is much more complex than just a simple set of instructions, because our client, they can follow the instructions. They've done the diets, they've had the surgery, they've gone to the therapists, they've done everything. So we're kind of like that last resort, that last port of call for them. And we focus on, let's say, emotional eaters in that case. And what we help people with is really getting to the root of their relationship with their bodies, the relationship with food, of course, but most emphatically, their relationship with themselves in the end. Because if there's loads of construction, a hotel going up next to you or something.
Can you hear it? Can you hear it?
It's only a little bit of rattling in the background.
Hold on. My husband edits this, so I'm going to say at 4 minutes in, he needs to. I'm going to make a note because my neighbor decided to start doing his lawn. So he started like 30 seconds ago. Yes. Let me close my window. I swear it's always on the day I'm recording a podcast.
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder if you can hear that. Okay. Is that better?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I think you just heard all of that. 100%.
Yes. Okay. So we're going to cut out 4 minutes to 4:35. Okay. So you were you were saying they've done all the things. They've come back to the point of we're a last resort.
Yeah.
Let's go
That's
from there.
it. So they've tried the diets, everyone under the sun. They've tried the weight loss surgery. They've tried the therapists, everything. And we're we're the last resort. We're the people. We're the group that people come to when nothing else has really worked. Because for these individuals, and I would argue more people than any of us are willing to admit, but these people are at a point where food is really what, and I know we'll come to this later, but what alcohol was for me, which is, it's not just a lack of strength or a lack of willpower or a lack of motivation or a lack of discipline. It's subliminally serving a much more significant purpose. It's helping you get through day to day. It's helping you cope with something, whether you're aware of that something or not. And our job is to really get to the root of what that something is. And we help them heal that relationship with, we go back to the childhood trauma. We help them connect the dots from what is really driving the relationship with themselves, what's really driving them to even require food to get through this moment. A lot of people are very stuck on, I can get everything else in life right. Why can I not just nail this part? And it's because, we have to eat. Right? We have to. I had the fortune of, throwing alcohol in the bin. When you're an emotional eater, you don't have that fortune. So what it forces these people to do is, I would always make the argument, sorry, I know I'm going off on a tangent.
No, you're
but
good.
I would make the argument that a lot of alcoholics, when they stop drinking, are not necessarily cured. That's the term we want to use. They've just become really good at being disciplined and knowing how to avoid situations that will prevent them from ever drinking again. Whereas the pain, but also the blessing of having to heal your relationship with food is that you have to eat. So it forces you to have to get to the root of what's requiring you to use food as a coping mechanism, because you can't eliminate it. You have to manage it.
Interesting.
So a lot of addicts, they can just simply restrict, because once the withdrawal is gone, whilst temptation is around every corner, you don't have to drink, you have to eat. So we work with those people who are really stuck in that conundrum where they have this all or nothing mentality. They're extreme perfectionists, they're people pleasers, they always have been. And then in some way or another, which we'll always get to the bottom of, food is just their way of coping with all of that.
Right. So you mentioned alcoholism. What's your story? Like, how did you get into this?
How did I get into, well, I assume you mean what I do, not alcoholism.
Yes. Right. How did, you mentioned alcoholism. How did that bring you to what you're doing now? Tell me that story.
Yeah. I didn't take alcoholism up as a hobby. It wasn't.
You didn't wake up one morning and say, "What do I want to do today?"
Kind of went downhill from there.
Yeah.
So the transition, I love this question. I love answering this question, because the transition for me was, all of this is an accident, or at least what we do at Bobby Nutrition was all an accident. Because part of recovery is finding a sense of purpose, and true recovery is really understanding why you think the way that you do and getting to the roots of all that, and so forth and so forth. And I just got to a point in my life where one of the wondrous things about rock bottom is that it's only uphill from there. So not a tremendous amount scares you anymore. And I was somebody who was petrified of risking anything. I was incredibly risk averse. I was very, corporate job, sort of keeping up with the Joneses, right? Just
when
going
was
through
this?
the motions of life. So this is going back to maybe 10 years ago plus.
Okay.
Now, and of course, alcoholism takes its time. So that started. That was shit, really. Can I swear? I'm not sure if your viewers appreciate a swear word.
Yeah.
Cool. Block it out if you need to. That was that was rubbish, right?
Right. We like the British swear
We,
words a lot.
good stuff. And we, lost the house, lost the
Mm.
relationship at the time. Um, so it really was a rock bottom. And it's what I deserved at the time, without the risk of shaming myself too much. But it all, and I'm not saying this in like the spiritual sense, it all happened for a reason because actions have consequences at the end of the day. So I take full responsibility for all of that. And once I'd gotten over multiple relapses, which is inevitable for most alcoholics, and the turning point came, it was really about when I met Jess. So Jess is downstairs, so we're due to get married in a couple of years. So that all worked
Awesome.
out
Yeah.
nicely.
Yes, for sure.
So that was really the turning point. And part of all of that recovery is, finding a sense of purpose and doing something for yourself. And like I say, when you've been at rock bottom, what felt risky before doesn't get much worse
Yeah,
than
it's like no
everything I
big deal.
described earlier. So whilst my perspective isn't isn't quite as relaxed and risk taking as it is today, it certainly was less risk averse than it was prior to that. So at that point, then it was let's just do something. So then I started Bobby Nutrition, got a bit of mentorship, and this is going to the time when mentorships weren't really a thing.
Oh
I don't
yeah,
think they
yeah.
were. Like it was
Right.
weird to pay someone to help you grow Instagram. Like that was odd.
Yes, and you're talking like 7, 8
So
years ago, probably, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I didn't
Yes.
really, and it all felt very alien to me. But I was like, and it was Jess really. She was like, "It'll make you happy. Do it."
Yeah.
So I did, and at that point, Bobby Nutrition was very much just your standard kind of weight loss macros. Calling out the myths, evidence-based nutrition. It was all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Because this is going back to the era when carbs, I know they're still very fear-mongered now, but they were really fear-mongered then. There was a real army
Yes, for
behind
sure.
it. So evidence-based nutrition then was kind of up and coming, and I was obsessed with it because fitness and the gym, it saved me in a way. Like it really helped me, and that became my passion. So that's what Bobby Nutrition was originally intended for. But the reason that I was quote unquote so successful with my sobriety in the end was that I didn't take this avoidance based approach. I was like, why do I need it? Like it never computed with me that I just wasn't strong enough. Because, surely if I think this way, that has to be a me thing. Otherwise everybody would have this problem who drinks alcohol, but they don't. So what is it about me what do I need to understand of myself to really, really get to the bottom of this? So it all became about the mind for me. I became obsessed with it. I would take like my journal into work, and after like a meeting, I would think, well, what am I feeling like now? What am I feeling? I just became obsessed with it, just reading and learning, and I became obsessed. And once I then started actually talking about my relationship with alcohol more and all of that stuff, this very particular demographic of woman actually just started to approach me in my messages and say, oh my God, the way that you describe your relationship with alcohol, it's just like my relationship with food. How did you do that? What did you do?
Wow,
And that's how
interesting.
it started. It was all just an accident. And that's how the best things happen, I guess, So it all happened completely organically, like completely naturally. And fast forward now, how long's the business been here now? We went limited in 2021. That's like an LLC for you guys in the US, the equivalent. And now, we boast a 100% success rate for everybody that we work with, as long as they give us enough time. And we're not just talking about weight loss here. We're talking about fundamentally changing how you think about yourself, getting to a place of peace, of happiness, of fulfillment. So we have a whole team, coaches, everyone in the background. So we're changing the world now.
I love it. So when you had that first woman or group of people that approached you and they're like, the way you think about alcohol is how I feel about food. What did you think about that? Have you ever had issues with food, or were you like, wow, that's really interesting? Like, did that
Yeah,
ring true to
the
you, or was
latter.
it just okay? Tell me about
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, the latter 100%, because it was it was it was the light bulb towards helping me, how do I put this? Helping me compute and move forward with a philosophy that I hold very, very dear, which is that it was never. You got your dog barking now. You're having a nightmare
I
today.
know.
What's the
Hold
dog's
on.
name?
It's Winnie, but our house cleaner, I knew she was going to get here. Like she usually comes before 9. I'm going to mark this here, 15:30.
Well, I'm
Hold
just gonna
on.
just keep it in. Just include
Okay.
her. We all love Winnie.
That's true. We do actually. Everybody loves Winnie, but not when she goes
Yeah,
crazy
yeah.
barking. So, okay.
Bring Winnie in.
Yes, go ahead. Where
Um,
were we?
so yes, it was helping me understand and move forward with this, let's say, so-called philosophy that, and I love saying this to people
Mhm.
because it kind of like blows their mind a little bit, which is that you've come to us about food,
Mhm.
you've come to us about your relationship with your body, when in actual fact, it's never been about either of them.
Mm.
Your relationship with food is just a way for you to cope with this internal shame that you've just gotten used to, so you're not consciously aware of it anymore. The way that you shame your body is just a short circuit way for you to do what comes most naturally to you, because growing up, you were probably always undermined and told that you're never going to amount to anything anyway. So the way that you talk to yourself and the way that you see your body is just a quick hit for you to be able to access that self-limiting belief that you already hold
Wow.
about yourself. The way that
That's
you view
interesting.
food, the way that you view your body, the way that I used alcohol, they're just coping mechanisms for a much deeper pain that we have to get to. So that light bulb moment, whether it be gambling, whether it be drug addiction, whether it be food addiction, if you want to call it that, whatever it might be, even working,
Mhm.
because I had a conversation with a lady this morning because she was very proud of her relationship with work. She was like, I can do
Mhm.
everything so well. Like I'm successful, and I
Mhm.
put the hours in, and I know that my work-life balance isn't great, but I'm really kind of proud of that. And at the same time,
Hmm.
whilst I'm kind of like, I work hard. It's a noble thing. You should be proud
Yeah,
of it.
sure.
I asked her, what is it about work that you are so proud of, or the way that you manage your work? And she kind of replied, well, I like the sense of achievement. I like the approval that it gets me. Um, and I like, yeah, all the kind of the stuff that comes with it. And I was like, okay, cool. And she said, it's about, I just love putting 100% into stuff because that's what it gets me. It gets me those things.
Mm.
So my question then was, okay, well, what if you don't put 100% into something? What have you made that mean about you then? So if you
Mhm.
don't put 100% in, what does that mean? Well, it means I'm lazy. It means that I'm rubbish. It means that I am
Mm.
not trying hard enough. It means that I'm a waste of space. And all of these horrific, ugly, in itself critical terms came out. And I said,
Yeah.
I call bullshit. It's nothing to do with this success that you've sold it to yourself as. It's because you're absolutely terrified of the pain that were to come if you were not to put 100% in.
Wow.
That's where it comes from. So all of
Yeah.
these workaholics that we in society, we praise these people, we pay them, we give them promotions. So even though, yeah, it can bring all of that cool stuff, and it's nice to have nice things, I suppose.
Sure.
But but when we really look at a lot of these individuals, they use work, and in the same way that people use the gym, by the way,
Mhm.
over
Mhm.
exercising and trying to be perfect and get the perfect
Mhm.
body. These things aren't as much about the positive outcome that they've sold it to themselves as much as it's about the pain that were to come if they were not to reach this arbitrary level of perfectionism.
Mm.
So even those things are
Wow.
just alcoholism, drug addiction, workaholism. These are all just escape routes or ways for us to cope with something that maybe we're not completely aware of ourselves over.
That is so interesting. And when you were talking about that, the workaholic example, it reminded me of the people who say, the all or nothing with fitness and nutrition. When I follow a plan, I'm 100%. I'm all in. I do everything perfectly. And then the question is like, well, what about when you're not following a plan? Because you're not going to be following
Hmm.
a plan for your whole life, right? And so it's finding that balance.
Exactly.
That's so interesting. So I've heard you
Hmm.
talk about, needing to learn to process your emotions without needing, in your case, alcohol, in other people's case, food. How did you do that? Like, what was that process like for you? And how do you work on that with clients?
I got it wrong,
Mm.
actually. Did this in a Q&A session with the community just before. So I got this wrong on my self-development journey. Um, what I tried to do was intellectualize my emotions, which is what a
Mm.
lot of people do. So what a lot of people, when they come to us, a lot of the time they can articulate their emotions and their thoughts, more effectively than a psychiatrist could. A lot of the
Mm-hmm.
time, they read the books, they've gone to the
Yeah.
seminars, and they still can't just get to that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because there's a huge, huge difference between intellectualizing your emotions and feeling them.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have spent the best part of who like when the ladies we typically work with, they're anywhere from 35 to 55, 60.
Okay.
And so these ladies have spent the best part of 20, 30, 40 plus years ignoring what their body is trying to communicate to them.
Mm.
So like the famous psychology book says, the body keeps the score.
Mm-hmm.
um, your body is always communicating to you the actual truth. It's just that you're in blissful ignorance of it. And the reason that we're often in blissful ignorance of it is because at some point, typically through childhood, we had to put a defense up. Maybe we were expressing ourselves authentically as a child. We were, throwing paint on the wall, or we were throwing a tantrum,
Mm-hmm.
or we were just jumping in puddles. These things that children aren't adults. They're idiots, every one of
Right.
them, and we all were idiots at that age. So we're
Right. Sure.
supposed to do that stuff. But what often happens, the story that comes is, don't do that. Stop.
Mm.
Tidy yourself up. What are the neighbors going to think?
Mm-hmm.
These are all of the ways that we were disciplined.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking for a child to hear that from their mother or their father, because this person is supposed to be loving them unconditionally. Now, I'm not saying your child should be an absolute little shit, a
Yeah.
nightmare, right? No,
Right.
I'm not saying that. Like, of course, you need to have a well-respected child and da 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 da. But at the
Right. Right.
same time, we can't apply adult standards to a child. It's
Mm-hmm.
moronic. It's ridiculous. Yet we do. And when when those so-called rules, it's not the rules that are applied in childhood, it's how they are conveyed that is most important.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Because how especially our parents communicate to us as a child, we learn through how we're made to feel. So if we're made to feel as though even we're doing something wrong,
Right.
but we're heard, we're understood, we're spoken to calmly. That's very different to anger and
Mm-hmm.
frustration and
Mm-hmm.
not being allowed to speak your truth or express yourself
Sure.
as a child. So how that is conveyed is extremely important. So uh, learning through how we're made to feel that how we express ourselves is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So the subliminal message then that if we're receiving that day in and day out, every day, every week, every month, every year, from the places where we're supposed to be accepted unconditionally, the message that we eventually receive is that, well, that's wrong. It's
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally wrong to express who I am, how I feel.
Hmm.
Fast forward 20, 30, 40 years later, you have somebody stuffing it down with something because that feeling is so alien and so full of shame to them, it's terrifying. And none of us like
Mm-hmm.
fear. So we have
Right.
to wash it down with something. So to come back to your actual question, I still hadn't figured that part out.
Okay.
And whilst it still saved me, um, that addictive personality came in where I just became obsessed and I was journaling and intellectualizing everything. So that part got me through. If I was to go back, ideally, the way it should really work is the
Mm-hmm.
order of getting into your body first and really getting in tune with what your emotions are actually trying to communicate to you. Because
Mm-hmm.
you've got kids, right?
Yeah. Yep. 3.
Yeah. Have they got any hobbies?
Oh yeah. I mean, they're old. They're 20, 18, and 15. But yeah, they each have
Ooh,
their own hobbies for sure.
right. Give me an example.
So my daughter, my 15-year-old, she loves to do cheer. She's on a couple cheer teams actually.
Right.
So she
Cool.
likes to
Awesome.
tumble and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, I wouldn't try that. It's not,
Yeah.
I couldn't, it's not my
No,
thing.
me neither. Me neither.
And what's her name, by the way?
Aubrey.
Aubrey.
Yeah, Aubrey. Uh-huh.
Cool. So when Aubrey was learning that for the first time, how long did it take her to get to the skill level that she is, at right now? It took like a few
Yeah.
years, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Years.
So, it's basic common sense that whenever we're taking something up voluntarily, as a skill set, we have to practice the bloody thing because once we start,
Mm-hmm.
so when we start something for the first time, driving a car, cheering, whatever the vice is,
Mm-hmm.
it's consciously taking a lot of brain power because it's so new. So we have to change here,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to do that, or we have to cheer,
Yeah.
and then
She's
as you
actually
can
learning
see,
how to drive a car right now too, which is
right, right.
very
So
crazy.
it's tiring because you have to
Yes.
consciously, yeah. And whereas she will have gotten to the point now where she's done it so many times,
Mhm.
it just comes naturally to
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Why on earth wouldn't we think that thinking in a certain way or feeling in a certain way wouldn't work in exactly the same way?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
if we have practiced over and over and over and over again for years on end to dismiss how we actually feel or to use certain vices to suppress all of that, this is why
Mm-hmm.
we can call it mindless eating, because it is quite literally mindless. We
Yeah.
often, and this is the argument, isn't it? Well, eating is a choice, and theoretically it is. But the
Yeah.
more the more often you are habitually reaching for food to try and save you through this unbearable pain that it just won't go away, it gets to a point where that conscious choice, it's a bit more debatable then.
Mm.
When I'm speaking to clients, a lot of the time, they'll describe it as they don't even know they've done it,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's just like Aubrey practicing her chia. The instructions that we would give her is practice, and you'll get better and better at
Mm-hmm.
it. But inadvertently, we are doing that with our relationship with food if unconsciously we are using it to suppress our emotions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's interesting. And I mean, I actually just did a client call on this last night on mindless eating and ways to make it more mindful because it can absolutely, your brain can totally turn off and you don't even realize what you're doing. And then 20 minutes later, you're like, your brain somehow like flips back on. You're like, what have I been doing? I didn't even realize I was
Mm-hmm.
sitting here with my hand in the bag of chips or whatever it
Exactly.
is.
Exactly.
I totally agree. So you have a guide. I want to just jump right into this, and it's called "How to Stop Secretly Comfort Eating When No One Is Watching and Why You Do It." I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering if you would tell us, like, give us the inside scoop into that, because that is such a good question. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why do we do this, and how do we stop doing it? That's like the biggest thing I think people would want to know from you.
Well, it's not a quick fix,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
It's not a quick fix. It's very much about environment, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very much about practicing once again
Mm-hmm.
an acute sense of awareness of what your body is actually communicating to you. So when we think about um, when we think about if we're sad or if we're happy, whatever it might be, and the reasons that we emotionally eat, we have to practice the almost categorizing what situations lead to which feelings, and which feelings then lead to which food choice or scenario, for example. And then what we can do is slowly over time start to develop an acute sense of awareness of what this feeling is, to the point of understanding, I've had this conversation with my husband, and it always ends up with me going to, lock myself in the kitchen cupboard so nobody can find me, like,
Right.
Dobby the house elf, and mindlessly eat until I feel so much shame. I just end up eating even more to manage that shame, and the cycle goes on and on and on. Whereas if we can make a connection to what that conversation means to that individual, and what I mean by that is I always use the saying, whenever we are triggered, we are never triggered by the present situation. We are triggered by what this present situation is subliminally taking us back to. We can't, by default, we cannot have a reaction to something unless we have learned what that reaction should be.
Oh, interesting.
So we have to have learned it from somewhere. We have to have developed some form of, whether you want to think of it as a coping mechanism or a safety net, or if you think about people who have been mistreated romantically for their entire lives, what do? They don't let people in because they have a barrier up, so it prevents people from coming in, so they cannot get rejected then. So they reject people before they can be rejected.
Yeah.
So all of life's previous scenarios add up unconsciously, and I call it like the trauma bank account. It builds up your bank account of trauma collectively. You're completely unaware of it, and it builds and builds and builds and builds, and it becomes so autonomous that in that conversation with your husband, as seemingly insignificant as it may seem, and he has maybe not calmly, but maybe not also aggressively, he's maybe got an elevated tone, and he is very disapproving of whatever you have just said to him, and you shut down. You're not shutting down to him. Your shutting down is a trauma response to whatever originally was telling you that you have to shut down and suppress what you actually feel. Because back then, that's what made you safe, and that's what protected you. And maybe that's what food helped you with. So it's not about, let's say, three cheat sheets to no more secret eating.
Yeah,
it's actually about going to the root, taking a few steps back, and looking at, well, what is actually driving you to secret eat in the first place? Reducing secret eating is simply a byproduct of you investigating what that situation now means to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned like getting a journal, logging this kind of stuff down. So let's say you do. Let's say you're tempted to go to the pantry and you think, "No, I don't want to do that. I want to, figure out how I'm feeling." Then what? Do you think that just practicing stepping back and thinking like more logically through how I'm feeling, what is this, what do I truly want? Does that just kind of help reduce that in the future?
Yeah, it's evidence. So up until this point, there's a reason that you consistently sabotage. Up until this point, there's a reason that you consistently reject help. And the reason for this is because all of the evidence that you have in front of you up until this point has pointed to you being the person who's at fault. You have failed every diet. You haven't stuck to the gym, and so forth and so forth. When we dig deeper, it's always going to be much more nuanced than that. So if we I've lost my train of thought completely. Evidence. So ADHD. So with when all the evidence that you've ever had leads you to the natural conclusion that you are the one to blame, that is where history will keep repeating itself. So to come to your point, when you, let's say you journal, to use your example, and you journal something, and then what happens is you take that newfound knowledge of yourself with support from your coach, and whatever learnings you guys can construe together, you then take that into the same type of situations that you have been fearful of in the past. But this time it's different because, well, you've done things differently.
Yeah.
Maybe you put a boundary in place that you weren't able to before. Maybe when you always said yes to meetings that you always want to say no to, maybe this time you actually said no. And then what happens is all of those stories that were playing around in your mind before, which is, well, if I say no to a meeting, I'm going to get fired and everyone's going to hate me and I'm going to lose my house. And then this is
worst case
the world
scenario.
of an overthinker.
Yeah.
So we catastrophize everything. Whereas when you then have that new set of evidence that is undeniably telling you, actually, this new place that you've just gone to, it's not quite as dangerous as your mind may have made it out to be before. Your brain then can't help but compute that as evidence. And that's how you break through beliefs then. And that's why this is much more than reading books. You have to do this stuff. You have to do it. If you just read about it, it's only part of it. That is step one. It is step one.
Sure.
But if you don't actually book the call, if you don't do the program, if you don't start the conversation, subliminally in here, that evidence, until you contradict that evidence, that's the cinematic masterpiece that is going to keep on going round and round and round. And guess what? Therefore, your actions are always going to consistently align to those self-limiting beliefs and that ceiling that was put on you ever since you were probably a child. Whereas if you find new evidence, ceilings suddenly open. And then all of this stuff that was, and this is the beautiful thing about it, it was always right there. It was always right there for the taking.
Just couldn't access it. Interesting.
Just couldn't access it. That's all it's about. What I always say to people is sometimes it's extremely daunting. I'm getting goosebumps talking about this. Sometimes it's extremely daunting to do something like this because it seems so far away. It seems like you have to start all of these new things and think in all of these new ways and read all of these new books and try all of these new tools. And it's less about starting all of these new things as much as it's about getting rid of all of the shit that was in the way. So what I say to people who join us is we don't give you anything in that sense, like we do, but the much more, ironically, accessible way to think about it is that you're just stuck in this jungle at the moment, and there's loads of trees and there's loads of stuff in the way, and the destination is over there. We give you some tools along the way to help you get through it, but that's what it's about. It's just about chopping down. The distance is the same.
Yeah, just clearing the jungle.
You just have a lot more jungle in the way than maybe some other people do. So we just help you clear the stuff out the way. When you clear the stuff out the way, that end point, you can see it then. It was always right there.
Yeah.
There was just so much stuff in the way you just weren't able to access it. That's all. So that's when I say to people, like my tagline is, I believe in you a silly amount. That's not BS. It's at my core. I genuinely believe that, not because I'm naive. It's because I know how possible it is. I've been at the bottom. I've lost everything. It is there for the taking, and I'm not saying it's going to change in a week, because it won't. It's hard. It goes like this, but with the right guidance and with a certain level of consistency, it's right there. It just doesn't feel that way because there's so many years of jungle in the way. That's all.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. I think that's a great place to end on, because that was really, really powerful analogy with the jungle and clearing the jungle, as opposed to like giving you all the compasses and tools to like make your way through the trees. That was so good.
Yeah,
So
that was
good.
pretty good. I'm well
Yeah.
chuffed with that.
It was great. So Bobby Nutrition on Instagram, is that the best way to find you, or what
That's
else?
the
What
way.
else can you? Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah,
So
that's the best place. I'm not as we still post on TikTok, but Instagram is the place to find me.
yeah. Okay.
And I talk to everyone. So if anybody ever
Yeah.
wants to send me a message, like I am right there. Okay.
I love it. I love it. You're
Good.
amazing. We'll give
Thank you.
Bobby a follow, you guys. Bobby Nutrition on Instagram. And thank you so much for joining us today. Okay.
Thank you for
Talk to you
having me.
soon, Bobby. Okay. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye.